when they come into my office. Typically, they say things to me like, I've just discovered my husband's sexual sin. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I am so confused. I am so angry. I am so hurt. And what do I do? And it's that journey of moving them from confusion to clarity, and from a place of instability and unsafety to a place of safety and stability.
Welcome to episode 6 of Where to Find Bread. I am so pleased that we have with us again Bridget Greger. She was with us in episode 5, and we just had so much to talk about that we decided to carry it over and have an episode 6. Episode 5 was all about Bridget's personal story, which is background to why she's involved in this work. I'm just going to kind of jump in, Bridget, and I have a question for you. So episode 5 was heavily faith-based. So this podcast is not just for people who are faith-based, it's for people who are not as well. So are your clients exclusively faith-based, or do they have to be?
No, they do not have to be faith-based. I am a Christian, but I will work with anybody, any betrayed partner.
Okay. So is your approach different for someone who isn't centered around the Christian faith? And if so, how?
Know that it's different. When you use the APSATS model, the 3 stages are the same. It's the safety and stabilization, it's remembering and grieving, accepting where you are, and then that third piece where you're connecting to yourself and others. So you're still teaching those 3 segments, I would say, and helping a client work through their path of healing. However, I am a Christian, and if they are a Christian and if they want to incorporate faith, they can. And that's allowed. And a lot of women, that gives them the hope that they need. That helps them on this journey. So yeah, it's to the extent that they want to bring the Lord in. I'm definitely not pressuring anyone, but if they are a Christian and they want the Lord to be part of this healing journey, I will walk with them with that too.
So I want to, in a second, get back to the APSATS 3 stages. But first, I think it's really important. Jenny Bacon talked about it a little bit, the difference between the roles of coach versus counselor. What do you see the differences?
Yes. So a coach, if you think back to the term coach, it came from 1500s with stagecoach. It was, horse-drawn carriages. They were moving people from point A to point B. You see that as we advance with vehicles.
Right.
They call it coach buses, moving people from one point to the other. And in the 1980s and 90s, they became more popular to have coaches in the executive role, corporate America, trying to get people to be their best selves, to have vision and goals. And so you started seeing nutrition coaches and financial coaches. So I am a clarity coach. And so I work with betrayed partners, helping them get from point A when they come into my office. Typically, they say things to me like, I've just discovered my husband's sexual sin. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I am so confused. I am so angry. I am so hurt. And what do I do? And it's that journey of moving them from confusion to clarity, and from a place of instability and unsafety to a place of safety and stability. And I feel like that's why I wanted to use that term clarity coaching, because that's what I'm doing with women. I'm sitting with them in the confusion and the heartache and the pain and helping them make sense of their journey.
So you said women. Are you exclusively working with women? Would you work with a man?
At this point, I'm just working with the betrayed partner that's a woman.
Okay.
I don't know in the future if I will extend that out to men, but at this time, it's just with women. And so with coaching, some of the differences you would ask with, coaching versus counseling. Coaching really aligns with that forward thinking. So it's sitting with you in the present and then working with you to move you to where you want to be. And you, as the client, are in control of that. You get to decide the topic of discussion. Which in coaching, we call that our agreement. What do you want to talk about today? What do you need clarity on? What do you want to work through today? And then coaching is a process of asking questions, which is creating awareness. Maybe it's a different mindset. Maybe it's a different perspective. Maybe it's challenging you on a certain mindset or helping you with boundaries. Think of different boundaries. And then the third step of coaching is action. So we call it the agreement, the awareness, and the action. So what do you want to leave with today? What step are you going to take? What small step can you take today? And so it's really looking at the process like that and helping with specific things like building a safety plan, creating boundaries. I work with women, helping them prepare for full disclosure. So those are some of the trigger work, grief work. So some of those are like specific areas where I work with my clients, whereas counselors are there, they diagnose. I don't do that. They do certain modalities that as a coach, I do not do, like EMDR, and those are excellent. And when I'm working with women, often will say, hey, you should, I refer to it to a counselor to get maybe family of origin work where you're looking at the past. So we always say kind of coaching is going forward. Counseling is often looking at the past. How'd you get here?
Got it.
So there's a place for both. Yeah.
So, I can't imagine that many people looking on the internet or in the yellow pages anymore I need a clarity coach. So how do people find you? How do you get it? How do they get involved in the counseling/coaching relationship? Who initiates it? What side of the betrayer partner relationship usually ends up with which role?
Right.
The coach, the counselor.
It varies from each individual. Sometimes I get referrals from therapists where they'll say, hey, I'm working with the husband. Would you work with the spouse? Could you help bring regulation to her? Can you help her with grounding?
What does that mean, regulation?
So when we face trauma, there is a neurobiological response that just happens in our bodies. Our amygdala senses something that is alerting us that we're not safe, and it releases adrenaline in our bodies, and we go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn. We go into all of these responses because we're trying to stabilize ourselves and find safety. But when we are in a betrayed partner situation, we're living with the person that is causing the unsafeness. We're living with that person that is bringing us harm. We have to share a bed oftentimes with that person. So those are the senses that it can keep your system dysregulated. It can keep you in what we often call either hyperarousal, where you're just constantly, you're full of anxiety, ruminating thoughts, you're fighting, or hypoarousal. I'm numb. I'm depressed. I can't even get out of bed.
Yeah.
I don't want to live. It's I don't have the energy to do the next thing that I need to do. And so we call it living in your window of tolerance is being regulated. Finding the place where you can both think clearly, feel, and it's your state of peace and calmness. And when we're betrayed, initially, we're living typically out of that window of tolerance, often in, like I said, hypo or hyper, and you can do both throughout the day. So that's where a therapist might say, hey, can you spend some time working with the wife? Do some grounding techniques with her. So that's how I might get a client. I shared in the last podcast that I also teach and facilitate betrayal and beyond. So there are women in that group that some use therapists, some use coaches. And so those are other avenues. And then sometimes people just find me on my website.
So you talked a little bit about the brain. Is there a typical impact that is produced by confusion and gaslighting and manipulation on the brain? Is there a typical impact on the brain of those things?
All of that creates confusion. Yeah, it's a response. There's a trauma response. So when our amygdala is sensing, and it can be a real threat or a perceived threat, but just something feels off. So maybe your husband is 5 minutes late and your body, you sense, boom, adrenaline hits and you're worried. You're angry. Your heart races. Your hands get sweaty. You just start pacing, like whatever it is that you do when your system is being flooded with adrenaline. Then if you stay in that, sometimes then the cortisol is released, and then that can lead also things that are happening in the brain. You are not able to get to that prefrontal cortex where you can think logically. And then that keeps you stuck and you're just constantly overwhelmed, confused. Sometimes when you freeze, you lose your speech, your ability to formulate a sentence and come up with the words that you're wanting to say. You literally feel like you're tongue-tied. And those are all just your body's response to trauma that's happening maybe in the moment, or that's just stuck in your body and that is just keeping yourself flooded with all of these chemicals. And it's something that you can't control. This is how God made us. God made our brains. We're wired for safety. So he made our brains to alert us to survival, And so but when we're in a trauma state, we are overstimulated and we see things as threats that maybe aren't even threats.
So you talked about APSAT's 3 stages, and the first is safety. And so a partner who has just discovered a betrayal, how do you go about establishing safety and creating boundaries for that person? What is safety and
Yes.
how do you get there?
So creating safety is something that it takes a little while. It's a process of them knowing that they are safe. You are reorienting them to the present. Okay, I am safe right now. My husband has confessed this. He is getting help for this. So it is the ability to identify, okay, these are my feelings. What are my feelings telling me?
And let me clarify that safety is not just physical safety.
Right. There's different categories of safety. So you want to we do like a safety assessment. So I'll ask physically about their safety, relationally, financially, spiritually. So you're diving into different aspects of how they feel. So safety is like calmness, peace. It can be physical safety. I mean, some women are so dysregulated after finding this out that their safety needs their husband to move out of the house, or maybe their safety needs their husband to move out of the bedroom. I mean, it can be it is a physical safety, but it's also like that's also impacting your emotions and your relations. So it's multifaceted there to safety. But when you're trying to attain safety, you want to find support both individually, like for yourself. You can find it within a group. You want to be able to establish boundaries. So when I work with women on establishing boundaries, the first thing that they need to do is identify what are they feeling. And I have a sheet that I give them that's called the feelings wheel. And it's just full of words to put to their feelings. And on the left side of the sheet is these are the feelings associated when your needs are not being met. Feelings on the right side are when your needs are being met. So on the right side is more calm, peaceful, trusting, confident, assured, whereas the feelings on the left are angry, fearful, anxious, overwhelmed, confused, lots of things in that those words are in those categories. So really the first thing is to be able to sit and say, what am I feeling?
Get in touch with
that. Where do I feel it in my body? And then what do I need? And so that's how then you can start creating boundaries. And like I said, maybe that first boundary, a woman knows right away, I cannot share a bed with you. Like that is making me so anxious, so angry. So I need peace and safety. And I'm asking you to sleep in another room. So that can be a boundary. But that's all a process. A woman has to first, part of that safety and stabilization, that stabilization piece is coming in, sharing her story, finding the right help, finding regulation. So to begin regulating, again, doing some grounding work to learn how to breathe and to take walks and journal and to do self-care and to be told from someone that understands the story and the process, you're not alone. This is not your fault. You did not cause this. I hear you. I believe you. And there is hope and there is healing.
Where do you think the shame comes from?
I think there's shame around so much of betrayal. I think there's shame that your spouse acted out. The behavior in and of itself brings shame. There's shame that, and these are not necessarily the right messages, but you feel like, what am I missing? Or what do I not have? Or I'm not good enough. Those are shame messages that we tell ourselves, lies. There's shame about staying for some women, because then if they told some of their friends and family and they've got their friends and family saying, you need to leave him. There's shame in staying and there's shame in leaving. When you choose divorce, there is shame behind divorce.
Why do you think self-trust and identity are all kind of knotted up in all of that too? Why is self-trust so shattered and how do you go about fixing that?
It's shattered because your spouse is your primary attachment. Your spouse, you made a vow to have each other's back, to be there for each other, to be faithful to each other. That is your primary connection. So when you realize that primary connection has been doing these harming behaviors to you, it shatters your sense of, how did I not know this? How could this happen? How did I not see this? One of my big shame beliefs, how was I so stupid?
Yeah, I remember
You
that
know?
with me. Yeah,
Yeah. But that's not the truth. The truth is I was being deceived.
yeah,
I was making decisions without all the information. I
right.
did not have informed consent.
Yeah,
So I was deceived. I was not stupid. I was
yeah.
deceived. And
Yeah,
so
mine was
yeah,
at some point there was like that's 44 decades of I mean that you can't be totally clueless. I couldn't be totally clueless. It was not a wonderfully happy marriage. And I thought, how could I not have known? Well, like you say, you're lied to, you're manipulated, and you have that state of confusion because you don't believe your lying eyes. You believe a lying tongue.
right.
Yeah,
And we want to trust our partners. I mean,
right?
that's what marriage is. You enter a relationship thinking that they will have your back. They will put you first. They have your needs and your interests are important to them. And so we don't think they could be deceiving us. That's not what we're thinking on the side. How are they
Yeah,
deceiving us? In what ways
yeah.
am I being lied to?
Frequently in my groups, I've been with some women who are, now that I've been down this road for a while, I've progressed through the different stages. And I remember how it felt to be very new to the realization and the grief and the loss and the emotions, which were so overwhelming. And I always want to tell the women who are at that stage, they're not going to be there forever. Maybe if you could kind of describe for a, a, a new one what those stages are. You talked a little bit about the grief stages, but what are the progression of things that they're going to go through if they go through this process of recovery themselves?
Right. I like to share a couple different pathways for them to look at and to visualize, okay, this is where I am right now. I am in the confused. I'm shocked. I'm numb. Some women can't even cry initially because they're just so numb. Others are furious, and the shock goes immediately to the anger. And it's just we're all different. What's happening in our bodies, we're all responding to different in different ways. But to encourage them, yes, that you're not going to stay here and you will have clarity. You will begin to understand what your reality is. That's what's so important in that stage one is really understanding what reality is. What is the truth? And a big piece of that comes with the full disclosure. And that kind of balances out that power differential. Your husband has had all the secrets.
Right.
He knows all the secrets and you don't. How do you even forgive if you don't know what you're forgiving? How do you choose to stay if you don't even know what you're choosing to heal through? You can't choose to fully stay if you don't fully know, if you don't have informed consent. So that full disclosure, which we see in most of the pathways to healing, comes typically in that stage one. So that's part of like establishing safety, establishing truth, accepting your reality. That full disclosure is a very important piece of that. That's establishing a groundwork of trust and honesty. Because if we don't have honesty,
Yeah.
we can't build. Honesty is that foundation.
Jenny said that more marriages end because of lies than any other thing.
Yes. Yes. Women will often say, I understand this acting out. Now I can understand it. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. It's not acceptable. But it's the lying and the continual lying that destroys my trust. And it does. It's the continual lying. And that's why in Dr. Omar Manwala's model, there's two things. There's first and foremost the sobriety from the behaviors, the acting out. Second of all is the integrity abuse piece. That includes the lying, the gaslighting, the manipulation.
Yeah.
Because gaslighting is changing her reality.
Yeah.
And if we're on the healing journey, we want to commit to reality. So you cannot have both. You can't have gaslighting and reality at the same time.
True. True. Well, so should a partner expect a linear progression in grief? Do you always go from denial to eh, anger to, I mean, how does that go?
It goes all over you and the shock. So if we look at the stages, we've got shock, we've got numbness, you can move into sadness, bargaining, denial, you can move into anger, and you'll move into acceptance. And all of those can go like this. And with a relapse or even a lie could send you all the way back to numbness and shock. But you cannot heal without moving through all of these stages.
Do you have a typical time frame that it takes?
Well, that's why they say the healing journey is 3 to 5 years.
Wow.
And I work with women that are still in that anger stage and they're 2 years in.
How important is it to the progression of a partner to redefine, reaffirm, and begin to live their personal values and strengths? I think for me, I really discovered that I was not living my own personal values. And so when I kind of went through that process of revisiting them, that was a big help. And I got some clarity and some direction from saying, okay, this is where I need to go.
Yes. When you can take a step back and say, what are my values? What is most important to me? Or what do I want my values to be? How do I want to behave? How do I want to react or respond that are consistent with my values? And what values kind of, when I describe it, it's the girding. It upholds everything else in life, your legacy, your mission, your purpose, your goals are all the foundation of that are your values. So what is it that's important to you? And as you can do different exercises to determine your values. Sometimes you can even just look at a list of values and say, okay, what is it with this list that resonates with me? Maybe you look at a time in your life where you felt aligned, you felt your best, and you can say, what was it about that moment that resonated? Or vice versa, what was a time that I was really frustrated? Why? What was not aligning? So maybe if you were really frustrated, you realize, you know what? It's because there was deception or because I felt injustice. Well, then that can flip it and say, you know what? I value justice. Justice is a really big piece for me. Or I value honesty. That is a really big piece for me. I didn't realize that my value was honesty until I realized there was so much deception going on. And wow, that is what, flips it. I had a client the other day that she was talking to me about a situation at work. And she said, I was asking her some questions like, what was it about that really bothered you? And as she thought more, she said, it's because it didn't align with my value of accountability. I feel like this coworker is not being accountable. And that is really bothering me. So those are ways sometimes to figure out what are my values and how can I live and respond in a way that aligns with those values.
I found that when we went into full disclosure, my coach had me put together my values in a sort of a compass to guide me as a North Star. That was so helpful to know that as my husband went through and made his disclosure. He read his letter of all the things that he thought that he needed to tell me. I could carry that with me. And what is why is that so powerful to have that compass with you in full disclosure?
I think it reminds you and it grounds you. It reminds you, why am I doing this? And often at the top, it's good to just have your goal. Like, why am I even doing this full disclosure? My goal is truth. My goal is connection, but truth, And then if you could have your values there and you have that in front of you. So if you are hearing something that is super painful and you need to take a break and you could pause and look back down at your sheet on your lap, I am doing this because I value honesty. I need the truth. I want the truth. And I am okay. I'm hearing the truth right now. This is giving me information.
Yeah.
This is empowering me. This isn't about me. What he's disclosing is not about my worth and my value. My value is not dependent on his behaviors and what he's about to say.
That's why the full disclosure was so satisfying for me, because truth is my greatest primary value. And that's exactly what I got. And so to leave the full disclosure, knowing that I had satisfied that, was tremendously rewarding for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I
So,
find that with lots of clients.
yeah. Well, so let's talk about the full disclosure. It is really scary, and as partners prepare for that, very intimidating. How do you prepare your clients for things that they may hear that are worse than they might have imagined?
It is hard. I like to use a workbook by Dan Drake and Dr. Janice Cottle, and it is a step-by-step workbook that helps you through identifying what is your menu, what are the questions you want to know, and then also why. Why is that a question that you want to know? What will that do for you? How will that help you heal? Sometimes I have to sit with the client and say, what is it about that question that will help you heal? And if it's not moving towards this, is this reasonable or unreasonable? Is this a question we should have or we shouldn't have? And so to just work through that process, this workbook helps to do that. It helps identify your worst fears. So
So I
if you
think maybe, I'm sorry, but people might not understand, if full disclosure then is partially in response to a partner's questions of the betrayer.
yes, the partner is able to ask specific questions.
Okay.
You can ask for the specific behaviors. What behaviors you can, a lot of times they're chronological. When did this start? And in what ways did you act out? Sometimes people, they want to know specific people if they know those, if there's someone, a family member or a friend. Those are all things that you get to decide. So a full disclosure is you also taking back your power in the sense of, hey, this information was withheld. I found out about it in a very traumatic way, typically. It wasn't the full truth. It might have been trickle truths. And this is my chance in a calm setting with counselors, with coaches, to ask what I need asked and to have him prepared his statement and answer what your questions are.
And two
Those,
things: trickle truth is a little bit at a time, dribble, dribble,
yep,
and it's truth via a polygraph beforehand.
yes,
Okay.
yes, that is a great way to do it, is to do a polygraph. So then, hey, there is a foundation
Right.
of truth within this document that he's about to read
Right.
to me. Because if you read this document and he's left things out, he intentionally omits things to continue to deceive. That's not the purpose. The purpose is for them to lay it all out
Yeah.
and to give you your foundation of truth and honesty.
Right. Well, and if you've been lied to, like I was for 40 years, and then to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to trust that he's going to tell the truth, that wouldn't have flown.
Right. Right. When you know that there's a polygraph and those aren't 100% accurate.
Right.
I think I've heard in the APSATS training about 78% accurate, but that's better than a 50-50 is what you usually are sitting with. So it's something that you can stand on and say, okay, he is, to his best ability, he is being honest and truthful. And it gives you that foundation and that power balance again. But that's what the full disclosure. And so some of the things that as we prepare for full disclosure with the women, it's saying, hey, what's your worst fear? And then let's talk about that. And there's an exercise in the book that we call where you shrink your fear. And so you say, okay, well, my worst fear is, and then you're asked, so then what? And you have to think, okay, so if that happens, then what? Well, okay, I would need to do this. Okay, then what? And you go through then what as many times as you need to until you realize, and I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
And it is a powerful exercise to do. And women that are talking about their worst fear can sit there over the course of 5, 10, 15 minutes and sometimes through tears and then say, and I'm going to be okay.
Mm.
And so it just takes some of that power away from that that fear.
I was so frightened of the disclosure process that for a while, well, about a month out, I was non-participatory. I was not really doing my homework. I wasn't, I was pretty numb to it. But then at some point I realized, look, this is my chance. This is where I'm going to decide whether or not I'm going to stay married. This is where I'm going to see if he demonstrates that he can be truthful. There's a lot riding on this. And so I better get busy and give this a chance. What percentage of your clients are able to do that? And, do some of them just say, I can't do this?
Yeah, I don't know the exact percentage, but I mean, some women, we've had to move their disclosure up because they were so dysregulated
Yeah.
and they could not calm down. There was just so much fear and anxiety that I worked with, the therapist that was helping the addict, and we decided to move it up, you know. So we've had to do that a few times. Sometimes you're able to just to remind them of the goal. If we go back to the goal, what is our goal? And let's focus on ourselves and what we need right now to heal. And throughout, what I like about that workbook is throughout the workbook, there are self-care and self-soothing and grounding techniques all throughout the workbook. So as you're working on, they call it your menu, like the order of the questions, what you want to know. It's bookended with self-care before and after, and so it's there to help you breathe through it and stay calm and find your sanctuary, find your safe place. One exercise, it's called the container exercise, where we can take all these anxious thoughts and these what ifs and these fears and put them in this container for now. We're going to put it on the shelf for now. We are not avoiding it. We're going to come back to it. We don't have to sit and ruminate in it. We will get the truth. The truth is coming in 4 weeks or in 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever it is. But they throughout that workbook, it gives clients tools for getting through and coming back to yourself. So coming back to yourself and your self-care. Maybe I need to be journaling more. As I get anxious, I need to go for a walk. Maybe I need to remember my grounding techniques, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Things that are helping you calm your nervous system. Breathing, the box breathing, in for 4, hold it for 4, and out for 4. It's doing things that we do have control over.
Yeah.
In a time that is a very stressful time. And it is. In that book, it talks about the intensity of D-Day and then the intensity of waiting for the full disclosure, and they're very similar. So as you wait for the full disclosure, it is very hard. It is very intense. And so you have to really lean into the exercises and the tools and the self-care that your coach or your therapist or within the workbook that you're doing.
I think a huge benefit to having a coach is the effect of being heard and seen and validated. How vital is that to the recovery process?
It is crucial. I don't think you can survive it without having that validation and
Because you're
being
not
heard.
getting it in your marriage usually.
You're not getting it in your marriage. So to have someone that is safe, that you can come to and you can share your story, you can be heard, you can sit with, and they understand, they validate you. It's crucial. That's part of that connection. I know I talked about in the last podcast. We heal when we are connected and safe. So that coach or your therapist can do that for you. They can hear you, they can validate you, they can sit with you in that pain, and you're connected.
So important.
And you're healing. It's so important.
What do you consider a successful outcome to the process? Staying together, going their separate ways. What constitutes success for you?
Well, I think that completely depends on the individual. And I think they get to determine what is successful for them. And I think you'll remember in my story, initially what was success in my mind was saving my marriage. That was in my mind what success was. And it wasn't about 2 healthy individuals. I was doing all the required work. But if you're with someone that's not doing recovery and you're in an unhealthy, toxic marriage, that wasn't successful in my personal story. But each woman gets to decide that. And that's the beauty of we all are living our own journeys. And when you have a coach sit with you on your journey, they will help bring clarity and maybe a different mindset or different perspective, or maybe challenge a thought, or maybe ask you, is this aligning with your values? Or like my therapist, like I shared, each week she would say, how much more are you willing to take? That was your question every week to me. And so only the individual knows how much they're willing to take.
Right.
I think it's beautiful if both people are in recovery and both people are healing, both people are committed to the marriage. I do think that's a beautiful redemption story. And I have a high view of marriage. And having a high view of marriage also means that when there are things that are counterproductive to that marriage, like addiction, lying, deceit, abuse, that doesn't go hand in hand with a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
So that needs taken care of. And sometimes that happens in a healing recovery program, and sometimes it doesn't. So in my case, for me personally, because that's all I can speak to is myself personally, my success came actually in the divorce process, because that's where I found my wholeness. And I realized I'm going to stand before the Lord as an individual, not as a couple. But I tried, and I tried all that I could to save that marriage, because I do value marriage and I do have a high view of marriage. But each person gets to decide that. And you've got some women that will choose to stay even when their husbands are not in recovery. And that's their choice too. And you can walk through, what does that look like? What will that look like? What will your boundaries need to be? What would detachment look like? How can you survive and be healthy in your marriage without a partner that's healthy? And some people choose that, and we can walk that journey together too. But I think that's the important piece, is each person gets to decide what they want on their journey and what they will define success to be.
Well, I so appreciate your coming on and sharing with us. Folks who don't live in the Treasure Valley area can go online at https wheretofindbread.us and look at our resources page, services and resources, and get connected with some referrals to therapists and coaches in their area. But Bridget, if they do live locally, how can someone contact you and get information for your coaching or get a referral from you?
Right. Well, they can email me. It's Bridget empoweredcoaching@outlook.com. And Bridget is BRIDGET. Or they could go to the website. So my website is www.empowered-coaching.org. And the nice thing about coaches is we can coach beyond state lines. So anybody in the United States or in the world can reach out, and we can do coaching sessions via Zoom.
Online,
right? Yeah. And we can even do groups. So I work both individually with women, and then I run groups for women too. And we can do online groups as well. So
I would also appreciate it, folks, if you would go down and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Really helps a lot to keep my numbers going with the algorithm. But I am so appreciative. I just want to offer you one more chance. If there's anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to cover, what would that be?
I just want the person that's listening that has just found out about their husband's deception to just know that you are not alone, and you are loved, and you did not deserve this, and it is not fair, but you will not stay in this place. There is growth and there is healing. Studies show that women that have gone through betrayal trauma come out. They do studies on post-traumatic growth, and they come out with more resilience, more strength, more purpose, a more understanding of who they are and what they want and what their values are. Comes from the scars, from the wounds. That comes from fighting in that arena for your sanity, for your peace, for your safety, for your clarity. And it's possible. So I just want women to know that it is possible to heal from betrayal trauma, and to please seek out help and support, because you are not alone and you do not have to do this alone.
Well, I think that Mama Bridget, you are just one of a kind, and anyone who does contact you is certainly blessed. Thank you for your time so much, and we will be seeing you. Thank you.
Thank you, Teri.
And all of you who joined in, thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.